Hey, 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 good evening. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It is time for Happy Hour with Dr. Lisa. I am your host. I am Dr. Lisa Liggins Chambers, and I am really happy to discuss this last blog with all of you and to answer a couple of questions that you have been asking me. Keep doing that. That makes me feel really happy to have people participating in this podcast and on the blog with me. My blog email address is Lisa, Lisa, Liggins, Liggins, Chambers, CHAMBERS.com. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, you can always call in. You have to have a Podbean account, get on their app. I really, really do like and appreciate their app. It's really easy to use. You can get on the air live with me and discuss some of your experiences or ask me questions live, or you can go to Google Voice. The number is 765-205-1959 and ask me questions there. You may also email me, kidscansee@gmail.com. Some of you send private messages on different social media sites. I appreciate that as well. I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram 3 times. However, the main page for me in relation to this podcast and blog is at Kids Can See Ghosts. Can you on Instagram? I'm also on Twitter, so I'm everywhere. So make sure you hit me up. I am available. I have to tell you guys, I am like really happy today. I went to get my booster shot for COVID today. I have to. I work with so many people and kids, and kids aren't vaccinated yet. So I have a duty to protect myself, my family, and them. But I have to tell you, I am in a really low tone today. My arm hurts so badly. That's one of the side effects that I had with shot 1 and 2. And now with the booster, my arm really hurts. And I took a Tylenol, but it is just not working too well for me. The only other side effect I have is that I think I have a mild fever, probably low grade. That's it. So I definitely encourage all of you to make sure you protect yourselves and your family. COVID is real. It is not a virus. It is no different than other viruses that have been eradicated within our society. The booster shot is easy, guys, very easy. I want you to think about it like this. If you are working and you are, in need of your booster shots for your vaccinations, make sure you get those. For example, tetanus. If you have not had a tetanus shot, and I think it's 10 years, ask your doctor because I'm not a physician. You need to get that to protect yourself. Also, about 11 years ago, I actually had to get a booster for DTaP. My doctor gave it to me because I had gave birth to my middle child, and to protect her, the baby, I had to get a DTaP booster. So these boosters are not new. They're very common with regard to vaccinations. So make sure you get it. Think about it, talk to your doctor, and then do what's best for you and your family. I did. This is number 3 for me. My parents did it. My husband is going to do it. And when the vaccination is ready for the kids, my kids are going to get it as well. So that is why I sound very flat and monotone today. So I want to answer a couple of questions, really, really good questions. One I get all the time. I just haven't addressed that question on the air because I'm not a specialist in that area. So I'm going to leave that for last. One of the questions that I get, and people have asked me this a couple of times, is, am I a medium? So am I someone, I guess, who can either have some psychic ability, or I'm able to, interact with ghosts like children, or I can see different things? The answer is no to all of those things. I am not, I have to share with you, I'm not a huge fan of psychics. So the answer is no. I don't think that we need to know our future. That's just my opinion. You do you. So, no, I am not uh, someone who can see into the future. I'm not a medium, any of that stuff. Sometimes mediums will chime in on some of the questions that I have on some of my social media sites, and that's fine. No judgment here, and I welcome anybody to help someone. So that is that question. I get this question too. Have I ever felt a spirit? Meaning, do I have a sixth sense? Um, I don't know the answer to that question. I have had a lot of paranormal experiences, not just from the children, the nebulous children, but also just in my life in general. So I do believe, obviously, or I wouldn't be working with the kids in this fashion, form or fashion. But have I ever felt the spirit? Probably once, and I wrote about it in my blog. And I talked about it with sitting on the steps one day when I was upset. And I think I also talked about it on this podcast. I also have felt different, entities or something. I always describe it as something. For example, when I talked about how I was pushed down the steps when I was pregnant, those different things. But have I actually seen, um, a ghost like right in front of me? No. But I did have an experience, and I talked about this, where I did see an angel. But I will tell you the experiences that I do have. A lot of times, and some of my closest friends know this about me, I'm a dreamer. So there are times when I do have dreams about my loved ones and about people. I've had dreams about different things with people that I don't know, such as celebrities. Like I just had a dream about a celebrity, and I'm not going to say who, but it was something in, relation to this celebrity and their time um, that they spent in the city. So I'll get that kind of stuff, but I don't know if it's anything to it. But just to answer you directly about that, there are times when I have, but I don't see ghosts. I don't have that ability. Another question that I think comes to me from the blog when I talked about dark angels. This is a really common question. What is the difference between black versus white spirits? And I think it's such a good question because remember, all white angels are not of God. Okay? All of them are not of God. Remember that demons can be deceptive and they can appear white. Always remember that Satan was a fallen angel. He was an angel, God's angel first. So always remember that. And so they can appear as God's angels, although they are not. So you have to be very careful. The kids have described that to me over and over again, and I've written about it, several times. And also, the kids always tell me about dark angels. Dark angels are what they describe as demons. Demons are dark angels. I don't know if all of them have wings. I don't even know if all of them are fallen angels. What I do know is that those of you who try to quote unquote summon them or talk to them via Ouija boards, you know, um, and other things, you have to be really careful doing that. You don't want to make a mistake and tap into something that you are not well versed in and you just don't know about. You don't know what can happen. So be very careful. I have a blog that I'm going to write about in relation to that, I believe this Friday. Because some people are worshiping just, I don't mean to laugh, but just like worshiping things that, you know, from what I've learned over many years can bring forth, dark angels. And so you want to be really careful with that difference. So don't be manipulated. Always remember, demons do not like humans. I've said this over and over and over again. They don't like humans. They are not your friends. They will harm you. Look at what happens in society nowadays. Those are all from dark angels, okay? All righty. Here's one of the other really popular questions, extremely popular. I might get this question from parents and just some of you who want to know probably every other day. It's so cool, but I have to tell you, I'm not a specialist in it. I do have some neuropsychology training. And so, what is neuropsych? Neuropsychology. When I tell you I love neuros, I probably love neuropsych almost as much as I love children. And if I had completed a second residency requirement in neuropsych and obtained a license, I would have been a neuropsychologist. And I mean, I'm still alive, so I'm still open to it. But it's a really cool area or branch of psychology. And so I did a residency, or what we call a practicum. My first one was actually in neuropsychology, and so I was really into it. The funny thing is that was the hardest class for me. It was called physiological psychology, and it was the hardest class for me. And I wound up teaching it as a faculty member in Chicago a long time ago, and totally understood it once I graduated. So your guess is as good as mine as why that happened. But once I did the practicum or just the residency in it, I loved it. And I had a great trainer who I ironically had the same PhD advisor that I did. And also, so he attended the same, program that I did. So that was really cool. But anyway, neuropsychology is actually the physical brain versus behavior and the nervous system. So we're talking about, different parts of the brain, how it interacts with the nervous system. Yes, I know all parts of the brain because I had to learn them. The nervous system, yes, I know that as well, but I am not a specialist in it. So when I think about neuropsychology, the reason that I decided to train in it for a year is because I knew I wanted to work with kids that had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And neuropsychologists, in my opinion, are the best people to go to have your kids tested for ADHD. And so I wanted to be that knowledgeable deeply about ADHD and take it back into the schools. And damn it, I did it. So that is neuropsych. Neuropsychologists also deal with the common question that I get. And sometimes I want to answer it so badly, guys, but I stay away from, I'll talk to you about it, but I stay away from, disorders where I'm not a specialist. So I'll break it down to you like this. A lot of your questions come in about parasomnias, or what we classify as sleep disorders. Okay. For children, you guys can probably guess the one that I hear about the most, which is, night terrors or sleep terrors and nightmare disorders, and also sleepwalking disorders. So non-REM sleep disorders, if you are familiar with them. So I hear a lot about kids, having trouble at night with night terrors. Also, another one that I would see, which I don't see that often, and I actually have a friend who has this disorder, and it's narcolepsy. So I haven't seen that much in children, and the couple times that I did see, it was many years ago. So I don't even want to talk about narcolepsy. But sleep disorders, and a lot of the questions are geared toward, parents, kids telling their parents that say they see ghosts at night. And they can't sleep, so that would be insomnia, which is another sleep disorder and the most common one. And they would see ghosts in that sleep wake cycle, meaning that they're kind of, how you're half asleep and half awake. You're kind of conscious, but you're kind of not, and so a lot of kids will report seeing ghosts during that time when they had that sleep wake, cycle. Um, the other time would be, and some of you can relate to this, I'm sure, sleep terrors. People want to know what causes sleep terrors. Now, I have to tell you, I have my opinions about sleep disorders, and I won't give all of them to you. But I will say this is another area to me that can be closely tied with some of the experiences that nebulous children have had. And so when I think about some of the stories that the kids would give to me when I was practicing doing therapy and also, strictly doing, clinical testing on kids, sleep terrors would come up a lot. So some of the kids would have experiences such as laying in the bed and physically not being able to, get up. They couldn't get up. They were, excuse me, I'm going to plug in one of my computers. It's getting ready to go out on me. But they would have, sorry about that, I forgot to plug it up. They would have a lot of, they would reveal a lot of times that they couldn't get out of the bed because something was holding them down. At night there was something not only holding them down, but a male voice yelling at them. I mean, very scary experiences. They would see dark, shadows, like ghostly shadows near their beds, and pushing them down and making them feel like they can't breathe. Those are the kinds of things that I would hear from the kids. So when it came down to diagnosing the kids with sleep disorders, I have my own opinions about that. However, I would have to rely on other people like neuropsychologists. So I would go ahead and send the kids to different hospitals for that type of testing, because it's just something that I don't do. But yes, I have experienced that. Sleep paralysis, that's what I'm talking about. When they can't get up, I've experienced those things. And yes, I do feel as if some sleep disorders are tied with this. And also, I am going to touch upon schizophrenia. I know a lot of you have questions about schizophrenia. Here's my disclaimer about schizophrenia: I do not specialize in schizophrenia or psychotic disorders. I know about them, I don't specialize in them. Remember, I work with children, and so the categories for children are a little bit different. So, I will talk about it in relation to children in future podcasts. And one of the reasons is the same with sleep disorders. There are a lot of people just like me who feel as if they're tied together with paranormal activity, and I do believe that some of this has a relationship. Cause? No. Can we say without a shadow of a doubt that I'm right? Absolutely not. But is there a correlation, in my opinion? Yes, there is, and we will talk about that. So if you have any questions, I want you to make sure that you ask me about those things. Trying to think, is that all of that is all of the questions that I wanted to touch upon today from you guys. Also, oh, one more. I'm sorry. I get a lot of questions about PhD programs. Oh, this is a big one. I don't know if I've talked about it, and I will say this, and then we'll move on to the blog. PhD in psychology versus a PsyD. A PsyD is a doctorate in psychology. A PhD is a doctor of philosophy. I have the PhD, doctor of philosophy. I have many, many friends who have the PsyD. If you are not interested in doing a bunch of research, the PsyD might be the degree for you. They do have to write a dissertation. The friends that I have that have PsyDs wrote qualitative dissertations, not quantitative. Quantitative is numbers, and that's the kind of dissertation that I wrote because that was a requirement from my university, from my department, but also with the PhD because we conducted research for 5 years. And it was a lot and it was heavy. And if you don't want to conduct research like that, ongoing research, for your 5 years of study in a PhD program, a PsyD is strictly clinical, and then they have to write a dissertation. And again, it's not, it's research based, but it is not dealing with statistics. No one likes statistics. You have to take a lot of statistics. You still have to take stats with the PsyD, but the PhD, I can only speak for. In reference to stats, and we took, I think, 3 or 4 semesters of stats and conducted research. So those are the differences. They both can get the the state board license in order to practice independently. So you can do that with both degrees. Now, why did I do the PhD? Because a whole lot of people who knew a lot more than I did, even about myself, many years ago, convinced me to do the PhD. At that time, PhD is the older degree. It's been around a long time. In psychology, the degrees are supposed to be equal. Honestly, there are a lot of older, more seasoned psychologists than me who do not consider them equal. There are some challenges out there with that line of thinking. If that's what you think, that's okay too. So you just have to research both and make a decision about which doctorate you want to get. But you can do both in clinical psychology, or you can take that clinical psych and go into forensics, or you can do what I did, go into strictly children. I also have a school psych background. So you have more questions about that, let me know. All right, let's finish up twin flames. I had a couple of people write to me, and a couple of people called me and said, whoo! Twin flames was pretty heavy. It was heavy. I mean, imagine how I felt. Sometimes when you're reading these blogs, I want you to imagine being that psychologist working with these kids. These two, I've always said, probably were the scariest kids to me out of all of them. And I've worked with some kids who will give you chills down the back of your spine just because of so many things that they can do, that you may not be able to simply because you don't see ghosts. So when it comes to twin flames, thinking about how these kids were whispering to me, one was guarding all of us from demons who were either in the closet until I opened up the closet, then they were in the walls. I mean, it was just a lot. So with these two kids, if we put it into perspective, and this is a good question somebody asked me, could the kids have been influenced by their father? Because children are impressionable. Absolutely. I've seen it happen. Some of you have seen it happen. We all know children are impressionable, right? Exactly. That's right. So, could they have been influenced? Absolutely. Here's the thing though. And this happens with cult behavior. This happens with adults who are married. You get one adult who has serious psychiatric concerns and the other one doesn't. But the longer that they're married, you kind of see them having the same behaviors, even mental health. And so when you separate the person who has quote unquote normal brain functioning from the person who does not, you tend to see the person whose brain is considered normal. It kind of goes back to baseline. And that's what I was looking for from these kids. When they were removed from their father, did those thoughts and visions, did they decrease? I have to tell you, in these kids, they did not decrease. So what did that do? That made me start questioning whether or not my hypotheses or my questions about these kids seeing ghosts, if it was real. And they were very concerning. for me, because it wasn't just the fact that they can see ghosts, their behaviors were alarming. They're what I considered their paranoia, or just the thought about, something being in the walls, something being in the closets, being very fearful. So I had no doubt that these kids can see these things. What I doubted was the accuracy of their stories, because they were identical to what I learned their father was telling them. We can heavily influence our kids. We can. I can tell my kids so many things, and they look to me to tell them the truth. And so the father may have been seeing ghosts, but telling these kids over and over again and actually acting upon his delusions, that's where mental health comes into play. And that's why he was removed. The kids were removed from the home, and he wound up being incarcerated because of what he attempted to do to those kids. So we had a couple of things going on with this family. We did have mental health. We had to address the mental health. Did it change once the kids were separated from their dad? It did not, but they felt safe. I will say that they felt safe. The second thing we had to do is that I had to separate the mental health from the ability to see ghosts. And that was hard with these kids. And the hard part for me was that I didn't get to work with them long enough to completely distinguish the two. The reason that I didn't get to work with them long enough is because the social worker who I talked about in the last podcast got really upset about how these kids were not just revealing information, but how I was trying to make this quote unquote clinical person stop judging these kids. You remember I said she told them they were crazy. She told me they were crazy. All of the negative things that I talk to professionals about, not saying to kids, this person did it. You don't want to make them feel bad. You want them to keep talking to you. And so what they were doing is these kids were trusting me enough to talk to me, to tell me every single thing that was going on with them. And it was up to me to decipher what they were saying happened because of their trauma versus their ability to see ghosts, and if it was a real ability or if it was something fabricated because of their dad. So the social worker was really upset. And yes, that is exactly why kids shut down. They shut down because people don't want to listen to them. They try to tell you these things, they get upset, then they start keeping these things to themselves. With me, these two kids, child G and child F, talked and talked and talked. And that's the point I was trying to make to this social worker. And she just wasn't having it. She was like, you know what? You're not helping her. And I remember because we were on the phone, and what she wanted to happen was for these kids to go on medication because she thought these kids were crazy. And now some of us use the word crazy in slang, and I'm guilty of that. I'll say, "Ooh, girl," to my girlfriends. "Oh, that's so crazy." One of my girlfriends is on now, and I'll be like, "Ooh, Jackie, girl, that's so crazy. That is the craziest thing in the world." Now that's different than actually having clients and saying these kids are crazy. So you know how demeaning it is when you have clients in psychology for another person who's supposed to be helping them. I mean, these kids went through, a whole hell of a lot. And to have someone else telling them, imagine, because they talked about this stuff at school too, and everybody's like, oh, these kids are crazy. And then someone that is now the guardian of them because they were removed from their home telling them, you guys got to stop saying this stuff. You are crazy. And then here I come. And I'm like, well, they're telling me this stuff. You got to give me a chance to distinguish the two, mental health versus actually three, if you want to say trauma, which can fall under mental health. But not a lot of kids are the victims of their parents trying to kill them, right? So you have all of this trauma, then you have the ability to see ghosts, and then I have to tease out which part of this is mental health for them. But she pulled them, and that was pretty upsetting for me. And I think we must have I must have gone back and forth back then with her bosses for a minute. But what my boss at the time decided to do was just tell him to kick rocks at that point because she was being too combative with these children. And honestly, that's just something that they did not need. They didn't need that. So I learned a lot. One of the things that I don't think I wrote about in the blog that I learned was that if these kids, when they tell me their ability, if they are not being harmed, like remember the little girl that I talked about who was running out in the forest at night? My God. Yeah. I quickly disclosed to her parents what she was doing at night. I mean, she was a little girl, and the ghosts were telling her to, come out in the forest and play with us. Oh, heck no, not on my watch. So, yes, I disclosed that to her parents. But what I learned is that these kids who actually can see ghosts, they just can't tell everybody. This was another example for me of what happens when these kids tell everybody their experiences. Not everybody understands. Not everyone is accepting. What we can do is we can learn how to deal with it as long as it's not harming them. Again, harm would be a reason for me to disclose what's happening. Clearly, with these children, twin flames, they were going to be harmed, or he tried to harm them. They weren't going to be, he tried to harm them. So they had to be removed. So remember, first line is always being a psychologist for me and falling back on ethics, falling back on training. The second line is, you know, trying to figure out what's happening with these kids and how to help them and how to put interventions in place and treatment to make them better. When they're under my care, I always have to use my clinical skills, meaning my judgment about what's best with these kids. And so when you encounter these kids, one of the worst things you can do is to make them feel bad if they are telling you that they can see ghosts. You talk to them and you open up to them, even if you don't believe it, even if you just want to burn some sage and throw some holy water on these kids. I don't care what you think you need to do. Make sure you listen to them, teach them how to cope, with these things. They need to understand it. And that was my way of protecting them too, because some of these kids had some scary situations. You think this is scary? I have more. And I talk about some of them in the blog. Um, it was a respect thing that I had to learn with these children too. And what that means is I can't tell other professionals all the time what's happening with these kids. It was okay to tell the social worker because the social worker was the guardian. These kids were in state custody. So the social worker was the guardian who signed off on all of the, signatures to start seeing these kids. And so we would, because the case was so severe and traumatic, it was okay to discuss what was happening back and forth. But I learned that a part of protecting them is giving them more respect, not taking for granted what these kids are telling me and then going back and talking to, guardians about this stuff immediately. I should have gotten a feel. I'm not perfect. I should have gotten a feel for, you know, what these people who are working with these kids, how they would receive what was happening to them. And so if I had a thought in terms of being more respectful to what these kids may need as far as, protecting what they tell me with their guardians, and maybe I would have been able to see them a lot longer. So it was truly a learning experience for me. And so what I took from that is not only respecting them, but that it's not always going to be pleasant. No matter how hard I try to be pleasant or make the experiences pleasant for myself, but especially for the kids. And it's not always going to be perfect. So sometimes when you think you're really good at doing something, and I'm really good at testing kids, I'm really good at, writing reports. I've been doing it a long time. It's second nature for me. I learned to always keep my guard because it's not always going to be pleasant. And so this situation here is probably the second time in my journey with nebulous children that I thought to myself, this is a really serious condition. It's not to be taken lightly. It's serious for the kids, it's serious for the guardians and parents, it's seriously impacting them at school in all areas of their lives, and it was impacting me. And it was time for me, to start. I'm not gonna say I wasn't serious, but I had to start protecting them better, if that makes sense. Because everybody is not gonna accept it. I had a lady tell me just a couple days ago in learning about my blog, she goes, I don't even know how you dealt with those kids like that. I don't believe them. And I said, so? I mean, what was I supposed to say? So what? I did. I did. I believed them, you know. And there was some parents. The other thing, when you get into the next blog, which is blog 21, and it's called Parents Just Don't Understand. And I'll go into detail about this blog next week. But one of the other populations that I had to start respecting more was parents as well. Because when you can see, or when I could see um, something in these kids and with these kids, like these twin flames, when I can see that there's some parts of it that I have to tease out. So the mental health part, the seeing ghosts. And when you start putting together like a treatment plan, and then parents are not on board, and then guardians, it's kind of like, okay, this is really serious. How can I get, what can I do for myself, or how do I train myself to start getting, parents and guardians who are not on board with this type of treatment. And that was something that I took the time to learn. Not just with consulting with a lot of parents who could see ghosts, but I was consulting with a lot of professionals. I was reading a lot of books like, okay, I need to learn more so that I can get, parents and other guardians on board with me so that we can help these kids. I mean, running into the forest, waking up and seeing ghosts on the side of the bed, hearing ghosts in the walls. Ay, ay, ay. And then to have some guardians and parents tell me these kids are just crazy. What can you do? How do you invest your time in shaping the thoughts and behaviors of parents as well? And so when I was thinking about what I did with Twin Flames after that learning experience, because that was learning for me, real learning. Somebody telling me that basically I didn't know what I was doing. I said, woohoo, yeah, I do. But that wasn't the point. The point was I couldn't get her to mesh with me. So I had to do something different for myself to make sure that even I'm coming across okay. So when you look in a mirror, sometimes reevaluating yourself is a positive thing. And that's what I was doing within myself, but also clinically. What can I do differently? So then I was thinking about blog 21. I was like, you know what? Parents just don't freaking understand. And I like Will Smith anyway. So I was like, parents just don't understand because they just don't. And these kids will constantly say, I told my parents, and this is what happened. And when I would talk to the parents about it, psychologist, true and true. This is what I did. I started breaking the parents down in different categories. So I would have different personalities for these parents. So when they would come in, that was my way of arming myself for what I'm going to be prepared for and what I had to do. And so, for example, if a parent came in who believed, so we go back to child A. Remember, I said child A's parents believed him, but it was his mother and his grandmother who were like, oh my God, this is great. You can talk to my deceased husband and grandfather and just tell me what they're thinking. And I'm watching all this stuff thinking, okay, this kid is telling me that he's talking to dark angels. He's not even telling me he's talking to God's angels. He's just talking to demons. So who's going to tell you this stuff? And that meant I had to start learning how to separate religion from what was happening in front of me as well. And that was really hard. So you had one set of parents who completely believed, and those were the funny parents. And see, again, child A had the mom who actually told me to go into building 3 because child A wanted to go in there. Remember, I talked about that kid who saw gray smoke coming down the steps and told me I had to get out of the building. That kid. And so his mother was like, oh, we better go in there because he sees something in there. And I'm like, I don't want to go in there. And she's like, if he says that you have to go, let's go because he really wants to see what's in there. And he said there's something upstairs. And I'm like, yeah, all the kids say that there's something upstairs. And I really don't want to deal with this, but okay. So stuff like that. So you had the parents who believed, then you had the parents who did not believe their kids. And they were just kind of like, fix him, fix him, fix this kid. There's something going on with my kid. Fix my kid. And it was kind of like, that's the parent who's not open to any of this. And you do get those parents who are just not on board with their kids seeing anything. And then you have parents who believe that their kids can see ghosts, but then they can't see themselves. So they're kind of like, I'm a little bit uneasy and I'm kind of disbelieving that my kid can do this. But I do believe that my kid can do this because biblically the Bible talks about a spiritual realm. So I know it's out there, but I'm not sure my kid can do it. But your kid is telling you that they can do this. And I don't know, because it's not like I can see Freddy Krueger over there. Or I can't see, a glowing God's angel over there. And the kid is like, well, I can. It's right there behind her. And I'm like thinking to myself, oh crap, this is a nebulous kid talking about the angel behind me as usual. Because that's what they would do. Most of them that could see ghosts, like have the true gift, would actually talk about the angel that stands behind me. Every single one of them. And I would look at them and go, yep, this is a nebulous child. Because according to them, remember, she stands guard over me everywhere I go. Like if there was a nebulous kid in here now, that kid would tell me that she's behind me. Every last one of them would do that. And so I would kind of be in the middle with those parents who believe, but you really can't show it, right? And then you have parents who could see ghosts as well, right? So I always had 4 different categories of parents. And the parents who could see ghosts themselves were actually the fun ones because they would be like, oh no, there she is behind you. She's up in the corner. Child B's mother used to always tell me that she would be like in my office, like up in the corner, like hovering over me, watching over me. That's kind of scary when you think about it, right? Unless she would always be over me. And child B's mother would point and say, the angel in the tree, he's out there. And so they would be kind of fun because they would talk to me all the time about different things. And some of those parents will actually see stuff outside and different things. And so they want you to help. They wanted me to help their kids control their gift. Some of the kids, and this is why they would come to me for testing or therapy, some of them would take it to a level of being physically aggressive in school, for example. So, like, if a dark angel told them to fight someone, there was a child B was this way, would fight someone, they would do it. So they were starting to cave, where when parents could see ghosts, they would see that dark angel whisper to their kid, but sometimes their kids wouldn't either listen to their parents, or the parents didn't know what to do. And so none of this would come out initially for the majority of these families. Parents who could see also had to trust me with the information that they could see ghosts and that I wouldn't call them crazy. Because believe it or not, crazy or delusional or any negative word to describe those parents, I call them nebulous parents, they have been hearing that since they were little kids. So they were used to being called negative things because they could see ghosts. And little bitty kids will tell you early when they can see ghosts. They'll just be like, oh, look. And so from these parents remember being very, very little and people telling them, oh, shut the hell up. You're just being crazy or something negative. So those type of things transfer onto their kids. And when they can see some of the same dynamics with their kids, they're going, wait a minute, time out. I do, honey. I actually see the dark angel that you're talking to, but you can't go beat girls up because it's telling you to do that. So parents who could see were a lot easier to work with. A lot of them just felt like child B's mother, that the negative influence was getting the best of their kids. So grades were dropping, suspensions, detentions, all of those consequences were happening, happening to their kids. And so they had to get, a psychologist on board to try to structure their behaviors better. And so typically it would come out that the whole family, or one of the parents can see ghosts and the other one's like, yep, she can. She saw my grandma. And so, those parents were a bit easier, but the harder ones, and I think I talk about them in later blogs that you may have not gotten to yet if you're just following the podcast. Religious parents were actually the harder one. So I have a whole other category of parents where I put them into, religion versus non-religion because two other categories kept coming up. And of the two, the religious parents were the hardest. So we will stop there today. Please, at your convenience, read Blog 21, Parents Just Don't Understand, so that you can be armed and ready next week to talk about these different parental personalities, because they got really real really quick. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, you guys have a good night. And thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate you. Bye-bye.